You're sitting in a dark theater, your heart is pounding, your palms are sweating, and you are objectively terrified. You are also having the time of your life. Why does your brain demand that you seek out the exact sensation it evolved to make you avoid at all costs? To understand why you paid money to be scared, you have to stop thinking about your brain as a modern organ. You have to stop thinking about it as a tool for appreciating cinema or managing your stress or keeping up with your social life. Those are just the apps currently running on the hardware. The hardware itself, the actual machinery sitting inside your skull, was built for a world that hasn't existed for tens of thousands of years. It was built for a world where fear wasn't a choice. It was a requirement for staying alive for one more hour. In the modern world, we treat fear like a malfunction. If you're anxious, you see a doctor. If you're scared, you look for a way to calm down. We assume that the ideal human state is a flat, predictable baseline of comfort. We think the goal of the brain is to keep us happy. But look at the history of the species. Look at the record left behind in the bones, the teeth, the tools, and the very structure of our DNA. That is not the history of a species built for happiness. That is the history of a species built for hypervigilance. Think about what happens to your body the second a jump scare hits in a movie. You don't decide to be scared. Your heart rate spikes before you've even consciously processed what you're looking at. Your pupils dilate, your muscles tense, your breathing becomes shallow and rapid, and your blood is diverted away from your digestion and toward your limbs. This is the physiological state of an animal that is about to fight for its life or run until its lungs burn. You are experiencing the exact same chemical cascade as an ancestor who just heard a branch snap in the dark and realized, too late, that they were being stalked. We call this the fight-or-flight response, but that name is a bit too clean. It suggests you have a choice. You don't. You are being hijacked by an automated system that has been refined over millions of years of life and death encounters. It is the most powerful, most efficient, and most relentless system in your body. And yet, here you are, voluntarily triggering it on a Friday night because a movie director put a masked killer on a screen. The paradox is that you aren't just tolerating this hijack. You are paying for it. You are seeking it out. You are craving the feeling of being hunted. And that craving, that is the deepest, oldest, and most mysterious part of the human experience. If you look at the landscape of human evolution, it becomes clear that safety is a modern invention, a thin veneer of drywall and locks that has been around for, at most, the last 10,000 years, for the 300,000 years before that, and for the millions of years before that as proto-humans. Life was defined by the opposite of safety. It was defined by the persistent threat of the unknown. Every shadow could be a predator. Every rustle in the grass could be an ambush. Every unexpected sound could be the difference between a successful hunt and becoming the prey. In that world, the individuals who were bored or relaxed didn't make it to the next generation. The ones who survived were the hypervigilant, the ones who were paranoid, the ones who spent their mental energy simulating the worst-case scenario. This is the key to why we love horror. We aren't just watching a movie. We are running a simulation. When you watch a horror film, your brain is doing something that helped your ancestors stay alive for thousands of generations. It is putting you in a dry run for a nightmare. Consider the predator simulation theory. It suggests that the reason we find stories about monsters, killers, and ghosts so gripping is that they mirror the specific threats that haunted our ancestors. Think about the common tropes in the horror genre. What is the most terrifying thing in a horror movie? It's almost never the monster you see in full light. It's the thing you don't see. It's the sound of footsteps in a hallway when you're supposed to be alone. It's the feeling of being watched. These are not arbitrary fears. These are the ancestral triggers. A tiger doesn't hunt by walking into the middle of your camp and announcing its presence. It hunts by staying hidden, by creating tension, by forcing you to wonder where it is. If you heard a sound in the brush 50,000 years ago, your brain didn't have time to perform a calm, rational analysis. It had to assume the worst. It had to assume that the invisible noise was a threat. Horror movies are essentially an artificial environment where we get to experience that state of hypervigilance in a safe, controlled bubble. We aren't actually in danger, but our brains don't know the difference. The hardware is triggered just the same. We get all the adrenaline, all the chemical preparation for a fight or flight moment, without any of the actual risk of being eaten. In that sense, horror is a gymnasium for the mind. We are training ourselves to handle the worst-case scenario. We are exercising our capacity to detect threats, to maintain focus under pressure, and to navigate high-stakes tension. We are doing exactly what our ancestors did, but we're doing it from the comfort of our own living rooms. But why do we enjoy it? Knowing that we are running a simulation doesn't explain the pleasure. Usually, when the brain realizes it's in danger, the reward is a feeling of relief. That's the, phew, I'm safe moment. But in horror, the pleasure is simultaneous with the fear. It's an exhilarating blend of dread and satisfaction. Neurobiologists think this has to do with the dopamine-adrenalin cocktail. When you're scared, your body releases a massive dose of adrenaline, cortisol, and, crucially, dopamine. Yes, the same neurotransmitter that you get from eating a favorite meal or winning a game. In a safe, controlled environment, the brain can actually relabel the intense physiological arousal of fear as excitement. It's a trick of the mind. You're signaling to yourself, this is intense, and I'm in control. Think of it like a bungee jump. The fear of falling is absolute. Your brain is screaming at you that you're about to hit the ground. But because you've paid for the jump, because you trust the rope, and because you know, logically, that you are going to survive, the brain takes that terrifying spike of arousal and turns it into a high. It's a way of bypassing our usual biological programming. We are taking the most primal, paralyzing mechanism we have, fear, and we are turning it into a toy. This is something that, as far as we can tell, is uniquely human. You don't see a deer intentionally running toward a wolf because it's bored. You don't see a chimpanzee trying to get a leopard to chase it just for the thrill of the escape. Other animals have the fear response, but they lack the cognitive meta layer that allows them to observe their own fear and decide to play with it. We are the only species that has built an entire industry around the idea of feeling unsafe for fun. This metacognitive ability, the ability to think about our own thinking, is what separates us from the rest of the animal kingdom. We can simulate the nightmare, and we can step back from the simulation, look at it, and say, that was interesting. We are the only animal that can turn terror into art, and that tells us something profound about what human consciousness is. It's not just a survival system, it's a sandbox. We've spent the last few thousand years filling that sandbox with ghosts, monsters, and killers, all so we could look at the dark and feel something other than the cold, empty silence of a world we can't quite control. But the simulation is deeper than just monsters. It's also about the social aspect, the reason we watch these movies together. There's a reason you don't watch horror movies alone, and it's not just because you're a coward. It's because the simulation of fear is a social tool. If you were a human in the Pleistocene, you didn't face the darkness alone. You faced it with your kin. You sat around the fire and shared the stories of the things that were out there, and in doing so, you bonded. When you sit in a theater or on your couch with friends, your brain is doing something else entirely. It's engaged in co-regulation. When you see your friend jump, when you hear the collective gasp of a crowd, your brain receives a signal. We are all in this together. You're mirroring the threat response of the people around you, which serves to bind the group together in a state of high arousal empathy. It's the modern version of a tribe sharing a warning about a predator. By experiencing the fear as a collective, we are essentially saying to each other, I have your back, and we will face the unknown as a unit. Think about the way horror movies manipulate the crowd. You're waiting for the jump scare, and when it happens, everyone screams, then everyone laughs. That laughter is the release. It's the, phew, it wasn't us moment. It's the tribe realizing the danger was fake, but the connection was real. This social bonding is why horror has been a pillar of storytelling since the very beginning. Look at folklore. Every culture has its monsters. The Wendigo of the North, the Kappa of Japan, the vampires of Europe. These aren't just random inventions. They are social warnings. They were tools used to teach the young what to fear and what to avoid. They were encoded survival strategies wrapped in a story. When we watch horror, we are participating in a tradition that predates written language. We are sitting around a digital campfire, And the monster we're talking about is the one that has been chasing humans since we first stepped out onto the open savanna. The monster has changed. It used to be a saber-toothed cat or a rival tribe. Now, it's a slasher in the woods or a ghost in the machine. But the underlying function is identical. We are telling each other, look at what can hurt us. Look at how it behaves. Now, look at how we survive. The horror movie isn't just about the killer. It's about the person who survives the killer. It's about the final girl, the person who uses their wits, their endurance, and their sheer will to outlast the darkness. We aren't just training to be afraid. We are training to be resilient. We are practicing the survival strategies that our ancestors had to master in the physical world, but we're doing it in the landscape of the imagination. But there is a darker edge to this simulation. What happens when the simulation becomes too good? This is where the modern mismatch kicks in, the evolutionary trap that defines our current era. Our ancestors were never meant to experience high-intensity fear for hours at a time. The survival system was meant to be a burst. Detect the threat, spike the adrenaline, move, and then return to a baseline of relative safety once the danger had passed. In the modern world, we can saturate ourselves in fear. We can binge-watch horror series, play hyper-realistic survival games, and doom-scroll through news about real-world catastrophes until our nervous systems are effectively fried. We are keeping the survival system stuck in the on position long after the stimulus has disappeared. This leads to a phenomenon researchers call sensory overload or emotional exhaustion. We're essentially tricking the brain into thinking we're in a permanent state of high-stakes danger. And because our brains are evolutionarily designed to prioritize the worst-case scenario to keep us alive, this constant exposure can lead to a generalized state of anxiety. We've become addicts to our own stress response. We crave the jump scare because it's the only thing that pierces through the numbness of modern, predictable life. Think about the psychological shift from the campfire story to the horror franchise. A story around a fire had an ending. It had a limit. But in our current ecosystem, the horror never really ends. We have infinite content, infinite gore, and infinite real-world horror at our fingertips. We are overstimulating our ancient threat detection systems, and the result is a society that feels increasingly jumpy, increasingly polarized, and increasingly prone to seeing monsters in the world around us. We see the monster in our politics, in our neighbors, in the distant news headlines. We are taking that ancient, perfectly functional, detect the invisible threat software, and we're applying it to complex, abstract, modern problems that can't be solved by running away or throwing a spear. We are in a constant state of fight or flight for problems that require think and solve. This is the price of our obsession. We love horror because it makes us feel like the heroes of a survival story, but it also leaves us in a state of chronic vigilance that the modern world just wasn't designed to resolve. We've turned fear into an industry, and that industry has turned our own biology against us. But even knowing that we're being manipulated by our own ancient instincts, we don't stop. We don't turn the screen off. Because, deep down, we still believe that if we practice the fear, if we look at the monster, if we survive the simulation one more time, we might just be able to handle whatever is waiting for us in the dark. So, where does that leave us? Are we just trapped in a feedback loop of our own design, slaves to an evolutionary hardware that was never meant to navigate the 21st century? In a way, yes. But that's only half the story. The other half is what happens after the horror ends. Have you ever noticed how, after a particularly intense horror movie, you feel strangely calm? You walk out of the theater or turn off the TV, and the world feels solid. It feels safe. The air feels lighter, the lights feel brighter, and the mundane frustrations of your life, the traffic, the bills, the emails, don't seem quite so overwhelming. That sensation is called post-arousal relaxation. It's the biological reward for surviving a potential threat. You've successfully navigated the simulation, and your brain is rewarding you with a massive release of endorphins. It's the same feeling an ancestor might have had after successfully sneaking past a predator or returning to camp after a hunt that nearly went wrong. We are hardwired to feel an immense, almost narcotic, sense of relief when we realize that the danger was manageable. This is the hidden benefit of our horror obsession. It isn't just about the thrill of the fear, it's about the recalibration of our baseline. By exposing ourselves to extreme, manufactured threats, we make our actual lives feel safer by comparison. We are effectively reminding our nervous system of the difference between threat and safety. We are exercising our ability to distinguish between what's actually dangerous and what's just a flickering image on a screen. It's a form of emotional inoculation. In a world where we are often paralyzed by abstract, unsolvable anxieties, horror movies give us a concrete object to be afraid of. And then, importantly, they give us an ending. The monster dies. The house is cleared. The survivor escapes. It's an exercise in resolution. It teaches our brains that fear is a temporary state. It teaches us that we can be overwhelmed, and we can still walk away. And this is why we'll never stop watching the dark. We aren't just looking for a thrill. We are looking for a way to manage the inescapable reality of being a human being. We are creatures of the open savanna, survivors of a long and brutal history, and we carry that history in every nerve ending. We carry the fear of the shadows because we needed it to live. We carry the obsession with the monster because we needed to know what it looked like to defeat it. We watch horror because it is a conversation with our own past. Every jump scare, every creaking door, every breath held in anticipation is a signal being passed from your modern self to your ancient ancestors. You are telling them, I see the threat, I understand the danger, and I am still here. There's one final layer to this. Consider the psychology of the monstrous. In almost every culture, the monsters we invent aren't just random animals or random killers. They are almost always transgressions. They are predators that have crossed a boundary. The vampire is a human who refuses to stay dead. The werewolf is a human who refuses to stay human. The ghost is a person who refuses to leave the physical world. These monsters represent a violation of the fundamental categories of existence: life and death, human and animal, presence and absence. We fear them because they remind us that the rules we use to organize our world are fragile. When a vampire appears, it's not just a threat to your physical safety, it's a threat to your conceptual safety. It breaks the rules of reality. And yet, we love watching those rules break. Why? Because it confirms that we are the ones who understand the rules. We are the ones who can look at a boundary-crossing nightmare and identify it as an error. By defining the monster, we are defining ourselves. By looking at the thing that shouldn't exist, we solidify our understanding of what does exist. We are creating a boundary between the world of the living and the world of the other. And by repeatedly returning to that boundary, we reinforce our own place in the world. This is the intellectual pleasure of the horror genre. It's a philosophical exercise in categorization. We are taking the chaos of a world that is fundamentally indifferent to us, a world that can kill you with a virus or a landslide or a stroke, and we are containing that chaos inside a narrative. We are telling ourselves that even if monsters exist, they can be understood, they can be trapped, they can be defeated. We are imposing logic on a universe that has no obligation to be logical. It's an act of massive, sustained human arrogance. But it's a beautiful kind of arrogance. It's the arrogance of the first human who stood up on two legs and looked at the dark and decided that the dark was something that could be mapped. It was the arrogance of the first storyteller who gathered their tribe and said, I know about the thing that hunts us, and here is how you stay alive. We haven't changed. We're still those people. We're still standing in the dark, watching the shadows, mapping the monsters, and telling ourselves stories to keep the heart rate down. The theater is just the new cave. The screen is the new campfire. The popcorn is the new ration of food. But the heartbeat? The heartbeat is identical to the one that stood trembling in the grass 100,000 years ago. So, the next time you feel that cold shiver down your spine while watching a movie, don't try to rationalize it away. Don't tell yourself you're just being silly or that it's only a movie. You aren't being silly. You are experiencing a masterpiece of biological engineering. You are witnessing the culmination of millions of years of survival, curiosity, and the singular human drive to make sense of the void. We love horror because we are the survivors of a world that tried to kill us. We are the descendants of the ones who were just paranoid enough, just attentive enough, and just imaginative enough to see the danger before it arrived. Our attraction to horror isn't a sign that we're broken. It's a sign that we are functioning exactly as our ancestors did. We are looking at the dark, we are simulating the threat, and we are learning how to be the ones who stay. And perhaps, in a world that feels increasingly fragmented, unpredictable, and loud, there is something profoundly grounding about that. Watching a horror movie is a reminder that we are part of a lineage that has been staring down the dark since before we had words to describe it. We are the storytellers who mapped the shadows, and we are the survivors who lived to tell the tale. So, go ahead. Dim the lights, hit play, let your heart race and your palms sweat. It's not just entertainment, it's an ancient ritual. It's a way of saying that even though the world is dangerous, even though there are monsters out there, and even though we don't always know what's coming next, we are still here. And as long as we can look at the monster, we can survive it.